Good morning. This is Debra V. Wilson. It's Tuesday, the 12th of June, 2018, and the time is 800 hours and 30 minutes. That's GMT minus 6, and I am in Canada, in Winnipeg. As you very well may know, that Tommy Robinson was arrested in the UK on the 25th of May, 2018, and subsequently found guilty of being in contempt of court, and he is now serving a 13th-month jail sentence. This podcast is going to look at, I hope to look at some of the, it'll be a short one, around the issues of the activist and journalist Tommy Robinson and the meanings and identities assigned to him. On the 19th of April 2017, I did a YouTube video entitled "Who Do We Deem Worthy of Keeping Us Safe?" And in that video I discussed that, as generally speaking, we as civilians and the government determine that only certain people are worthy of our trust, and that may be based on myriad of things, identity markers such as gender, such as age, such as ethnicity, orientation, so forth and so on. And this podcast, I'm curious to understand how some assigned meanings that are being projected onto Mr. Robinson by civil society and civilians, his supporters. One of the things that's become abundantly clear for me, in my opinion, is that Mr. Robinson has become a martyr of sorts for some, in not just the UK, but some globally, around issues of freedom of speech. And in the UK, I think he's become a martyr and a symbol for some about their feelings of being unheard by the police, and about being unheard in terms of their issues around national security. Now, whether I would agree about how they construct their national security as being something specific to one group or identity, and the threat being from another group and identity, I would probably challenge, and do challenge, the simplicity of it. But nevertheless, I think that's all part of the equation of the identity and meaning assigned to Tommy Robinson. So to be a little clearer, or should I say a lot clearer, for many people, I think Tommy Robinson symbolizes standing up to what is good in Britain and British identity and British people. Also, I think he symbolizes for some people the fact that they feel failed by the state, and they do not feel the state has the ability or interest. I think that there are some people that feel that way, to keep them safe, and that Tommy Robinson is the person, has become the poster person. And I do not seek to denigrate the way in which I believe some people view Mr. Robinson. I'm trying to, as accurately as possible, communicate what I think is the way some people feel about him. And that would be that he is speaking up for people that I think feel unheard by the state, and part of that around issues of security and identity. And on the issue of security, one of the things that the most significant thing assigned to Mr. Robinson is that he is a pioneer of sorts of speaking up about the grooming gangs in the UK. For me, and so I'm going to step back for a little bit. For me, I'm 60 years old, and I spent a quarter of a century in the United Kingdom working as an activist, in London, England, and and though my activism started out being a more generalized and quote unquote traditional type of feminism, it certainly began after 9/11 to take the form of what I would say is being called now counter extremism, activism, and I would add through a feminist lens. So looking at fundamentalism and extremism and how it manifested itself in the UK, and looking at that through a gender lens. I had, in the process of my activism, I worked primarily through and with NGOs, feminist-based NGOs. We had the good fortune to, on a regular basis, have meetings in Parliament, in places in Parliament, and which gave us the opportunity to network with other feminists, and also to be in the space in the government, working in a government space. There were people from the House of Lords that were more than willing to provide us with a safe space to meet. Also, I, on a regular basis, I think the best way to put it is, was interviewed by Special Branch, and those interviews often led to discussions. I'm trying to be transparent and remain respectful of certain confidences. Over the course of working in the UK for the 25 years, I remember, and many years ago, hearing women, South Asian women, primarily South Asian women, and white English women discuss the grooming gangs. I remember that from the 90s. I am aware of the work of organizations like Southall Black Sisters, and I'm aware of the works of an organization called Women Against Fundamentalism, and that's WAF. And then I worked with an organization that the original name was Women Worldwide Against Fundamentalism and for Equality. All of those women I remember 20 years ago, and longer, further back than that, were discussing grooming gangs in the UK. I'm bringing it up in this podcast to only ask the question. I feel I'm acutely aware that Tommy Robinson has been assigned the role, I think, not only as a martyr to the fight for British identity, but also freedom of speech, but also as a leader that some people feel that he will be able to save / restore what is inherently the good Britain. He has, in my opinion, been deemed worthy of being the savior to some people. So this is one of those podcasts that I do in which I ask myself a series of philosophical questions, and I ask my audience to join in with me. And the question I would ask is not to denigrate Mr. Robinson about his desires I question the methodology, but his desire to want the best for his country. But again, I would question the methodology and how you construct what the best is. But the fact that he wants the best for his country, I understand that. Again, I would question how you define what the best is and the methodology. But after saying that, I would question why it has been assigned to him when there were women before him. I recall the women I've met. Some I had the good fortune of working on other activist causes with, but I'm acutely aware that 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there were women, South Asian and white English women, that I recall. I'm not saying there weren't other identities, ethnicity, women of other ethnic groups working on this cause, but I'm curious, and I would ask the question, and I'm trying to understand why Mr. Robinson has been deemed as worthy of saving and being the spokesperson when so many feminists before him have communicated equal concern about the abuse of children and others. I have some thoughts about why I think at this particular time in history certain meanings and identities have been assigned to Mr. Robinson, but that's for another podcast. For this podcast, the question, why were the women who came before him not heard and not been given the moniker and, dare I say, honor of being cast as she who is trying to save us, help us, serve their country? Again, how do we define and how do we decide who is worthy of saving us, protecting us? Again, I have some thoughts going through my mind, but that's for another podcast. In the meantime, ask yourself the question, and I'm going to post some links to the previously mentioned groups where I can find information. I will post it. And have a think or two about how we decide who's worthy of protecting us and who's worthy of saving us. Thank you. This is Debra V. Wilson. And again, it's the 12th of June, 2018, Tuesday. The time is now 800 hours and 43 minutes, and that's GMT -6. And again, I'm in Canada. Thank you.